We are near the end now, but just to clarify, the email store was sending these events to the spam detector, the preference store, and the search engine. So it's going to use something like Kafka or any messaging queue. And you see here that the different services have subscribed themselves to the same message queue, and they're at different positions. So spam detector has till now been able to see email 1 and email 2, while preference store is a little ahead, it's at position 3, so it's pulled out all 3 emails and it's good to go. Like the 4th email, it's going to go for it next. You can have a look at the message queue video I made on YouTube, and also a little bit on the push versus pull architecture. Again, that's on YouTube. Quite interesting how it's going to handle all this load. But there's another service which actually needs this information, and that is the contacts service. I'll call it the contacts manager. What it does is every time you send an email, that person is actually added to your contact, the person you're sending it to. So I have a mapping of user ID from and user ID to. So these two people are now contacts of each other. So if it's 1, 2, 3 sending it to 4, 5, 6, they are each contact of each other. Unless, of course, the other guy marks it as spam. So if you mark it as spam, then the contacts manager needs that information to actually be able to tag it as not a contact. Or we can do the other smart thing, which was the email store is storing whether this email has been processed yet or not. So you don't pull from the same queue, you in fact pull from a different queue which sends you only processed emails. Once that particular tags have been set in the email store, then it pushes it to this thing that yes, this is an email with the tags. So the contacts manager can pull from there, and in fact the search engine will also pull from there. Once it has been marked as spam or not spam, the contacts manager can use that relevant logic to set contacts here. So we are pretty much done. There's just a small thing remaining, which is what happens with groups. You have the group email address which has to expand to 10 other people. No big deal actually, as long as the group is small and you don't have a big fan out. So the group ID is the email address of the group, which maps to user IDs. So you can store this as JSON. This should be fine. But you also sometimes need to tell which groups does one user belong to. Do you have access to send emails as that group sometimes? For that, instead of JSON, you can just store it as. So basically user IDs 111, 789 and 456 belong to the group 123. Okay, that's what it's saying. You can keep indexes on both of these. Because you need every entry to be an ID, you can store a separate ID here itself, 1, 2, and 3. It looks like we are done with the architecture, but there's one thing which is remaining, and that is that the external emails that we need to send, let's say to Microsoft.com or Yahoo.com, we haven't taken care of that. So all of these emails currently are noted in our internal system, but if you need to send it to an external SMTP server, SMTP, and this will route it to the relevant server, let's say Yahoo. So if you're a Gmail user and you're sending an email to a Gmail user itself, you can avoid going through this process, but otherwise you need to actually send it to an SMTP server which is going to redirect it to the right place. Also, external users can actually send you emails. So in that case, your server will forward it to the email store, all of this relevant information, and then the whole process again starts. So when we need to send emails, we use an SMTP server, but when we need to receive emails, we use an IMAP server. An important way to validate your architecture, your design, is to look at you sending an email, everything working perfectly, but what happens when an external person does the same thing? Yeah, when you receive an email, does everything else work smoothly again? Does your preference store correctly bucket the email in the right place? Does your spam detector detect it? And so on and so forth. So had we used the straight request response architecture, this wouldn't have been possible. But because we have used message queues to push onto the downstream processes, this is still working. Finally, let's take all of these components and merge them together to create a single architectural diagram. So this is our final architecture diagram. What it needs is a gateway that we talked about. It's going to be taking HTTP requests from users who will first register themselves using the authentication service. This service has been registered to the service manager first, which says that which boxes, which IP addresses of this service are currently serving requests. Based on that mapping of box to service, the gateway can then send to the relevant IP address this request with the request object. And one thing I forgot here in the auth service is the username taken. That can be a simple API that the auth service can provide. The other thing is, once we have the user registered, you want to log in. That happens through the authentication service. After logging in, you want to add your profile details. You want to add any kind of preferences that you have in terms of email or layout. That happens through the user preference store. An interesting thing to consider here is, what about retrospective tags? Like a person sends an email and then they change their preference in the preference store. Do you retrospectively mark those emails according to the relevant tags? And the answer would be yes. So basically what you have is, anytime your preference changes, you can go through the user's emails in the email store and run the logic again. So that would be an expensive process, so you can use a cron job over there. Anytime you send an email, there's quite a few people who are interested in it. Firstly, the preference store wants to tag the emails. The spam filter wants to detect spam. The search engine wants to see all the content of the email and build on its reverse indexes. And the contacts manager wants to tell whether a person has been added to sender's contacts or not. That's the reason why the email store has been broken into 3 components. The first one being the most important parts of the email. The other things being the tags and the content of the email. The contacts manager also stores group mappings, which allows people to broadcast when they need to, based on the group to user IDs mapping. And finally, external emails are going to be sent through the SMTP server. If you have a Yahoo email address or a Hotmail email address, you can use this SMTP server to send it to the relevant server for that service. If you have any doubts on this, then you can let me know in the comments. And if you have any suggestions for future videos for this course, please let me know. I'll see you next time.